What happened, wouldn't it? Oh, it's recording now. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome back. If some of you are confused on this channel and wonder why almost a week has gone by since playoffs have started around the world and I have not posted a single video, it's done on purpose. I can't do that again. I can't go through every series and making a video. Did you notice how down to the wire that was? Not happening again.
A lot of games.
We've had a long time missing participant since almost a year ago.
Jeez,
So-
yeah, I guess so.
Just to introduce to some people who have not seen our earlier videos, this is Vision Denial. I'm Sam, and this is Conor. We've got Josh, who's missing, but eventually, probably one of these weeks, we'll have him in.
Yep.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. And we're going to be talking about the first week of summer playoffs. So far, the only regions who have played up until... And we're recording this on the 13th of August, but we're going to be talking about all the playoffs up until the end of the 12th of August.
Yep.
So that means that the regions that have started are Brazil, Japan, Europe, Southeast Asia, or the PCS, and China. So
Yep.
that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the... I'm going to say this now ahead of time, 11 regions, not 12, because Vietnam has yet to even start their summer season, let alone playoffs. And it looks like they're not going to be able to participate in Worlds again. That sucks. That being said, 5 out of the 11 regions have already started, and on the 13th you have Russia, and then eventually Turkey on the day after, and so on and so forth. Most of the regions will have started by the time the 18th of August rolls around. So up until the 12th of August, only the first 5 regions.
Doesn't Korea start like today too?
No, Korea starts on the 18th. They have yet to even decide their seeding. They have a virtual 6-way tie from 1st to 6th.
Oh, okay. They're still in
They're still
today's
in
game
their
the last week. Gotcha.
Yep. They're in the last week of their summer season.
Gotcha.
So I would like to dub this show, where our regular show from Vision Denial is during Worlds, and that's just the Vision Denial podcast. And I've called the road to MSI, and then like the breakdown to MSI, or what was it, like the vision clearing. I made up a bunch of names to a bunch of shows that I don't know if I'm ever going to stick to them. This one, I think I'm going to call, I don't know, come up with a name at this point. I had a name off the top of my head beforehand, before starting this. I was like, oh yes, this is what World Watch is what I was going to call it. And instead of explaining specifically the details of each particular playoff series, and I think we're going to still talk about them, because I think there's a North American series that I am largely super interested in. Or at least 2 of them that I'm interested in, because I think it has large implications on how most of the other regions are faring compared to China and Korea at this point. But it's just watching around what kind of the trends are going in. What are we expecting from like what's going to happen by the time the world patch is like definitely decided, because every region is going to be playing, and this is a thing they implemented, I believe, in 2019, where the last patch that every region will play is the same patch for their playoffs. So every region's playing on 11.15, and so that informs a lot of the trends that everybody's going to be doing into Worlds.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was the same thing last year. So that's why like there was a lot of Lilia strategies that ran around.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, I want to propose something very interesting that I've seen across the board that only China has brought up, and this was something very interesting that I've seen through the, if I remember correctly, the Suning versus LNG series. And this is the only 5-game series so far that it has run. Most of the other series are 3 or 4 game series, including the best of 3 series, but best of 3 series I hope are 3 games. Otherwise, it's not fun to watch. They're usually not. Ziggs has been a trend going up.
Yeah.
Right? And Ziggs as a trend is expected, right? It has a high clear speed, it has a high turret destroying speed, it accomplishes a lot of stuff that was in the meta when it was mages almost only exclusively down bot lane.
Yep.
And it tends to not have many answers to it except for maybe other wave clear specific ADCs, right? Or if you tend to put another mage down there, but that doesn't work as well because that type
Yeah.
of matchup in the bot lane.
Clears waves too fast.
Yeah, exactly, right? The trend that I saw specifically with the Sunin LNG series is that they would pick Vayne into it.
Okay.
And I've mentioned very harshly to a lot of people that if I see somebody pick Vayne into a matchup against another marksman, it's because they're way too cocky. They think they're way too good for their britches.
Well,
and I want to get your thoughts on it before I put my thoughts into what the Vayne versus Ziggs matchup.
I can kind of see it because remember Vayne's dash is on a short cooldown compared to most anyone else's. And the thing about Ziggs is a lot of his abilities are fairly telegraphed. So I don't mind Vayne into stuff like a Ziggs or a Xerath because you can actually, a lot of these slower long-range skill shots, you can actually dodge out of the way. So like when you see the Ziggs bomb rolling towards you, it's very easy to roll out of the way. When he plays the minefield, it's pretty easy to, depending where you are, to roll to one side of it and go around it. Whereas a lot of other champs would take a lot longer to go around a Ziggs minefield. Vayne can kind of either roll towards him, dodge a bomb, and now have a favorable trade because she can dodge a lot of his damage. So,
for me, the matchup portion of it didn't matter too much because Vayne versus a lot of other ADCs in terms of like 1v1 matchups was always very coin flippy regardless. And if you add it against a mage, a lot of the other mages tend to still have that telegraphed move. The only one that you can't do that with is Syndra, which is another trend that I've seen internationally speaking.
Yep.
The reason why I think I don't hate it as much this time, and it literally for me dawned on me this is the only time that I did not get mad watching a Vayne being picked, is because the weakness that Vayne has is the same weakness that Ziggs has. Ziggs does not have any combat prowess early in, and so it has to rely on farming. And if Vayne is always pushed in, she's never in a vulnerable spot to farm. And so the entire time you have two champions, one clears faster than the other, which is fine, but both require a lot of farm and time to be relevant, right? You give up some lane pressure, but if you pick Vayne, you're going to be opting into giving up lane pressure regardless.
True. And she farms under tower really well.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Roll for the extra AD if you need it. Get the third auto.
And based off of the compositions that you have to pick, because there's literally a have to pick when you have compositions that include Ziggs in the bot lane, which usually is a marksman mid lane, typically Lucian, or some melee AD mid lane, and some hard form engage bruiser, either in the jungle or in top lane. And it also includes a bruiser in bot lane, which means it's a perfect farming vill for team fights with Vayne because it informs exactly into what you want to do. And I thought, this is great. What a great idea in general, because literally picking Ziggs forces you and pigeonholes you into a specific kind of composition that Vayne is very well suited against.
Yeah, I can definitely see it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have any stats specifically to it because it's the only series that I've seen where Vayne was the answer.
Okay.
And unfortunately to me, I think this is going to be one of those things where because it was the answer, this was LNG's answer to no. LNG answered the Ziggs with a Vayne, and then Suning picked Vayne without it being an answer to Ziggs. It was banned, and it did not do as well.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right? Because it's still a Vayne. That's the problem with it. But I don't know. It's something I think I want to see more of to see whether or not this is something that becomes just a trend or like, oh, Vayne is good again. Or if people are going to actually catch on that this is a good way to counter Ziggs, and so Ziggs will fall off over time.
he did get nerfed in the next patch as well, which is not relevant now, but it might be for Worlds. Like they reduced the slow on his minefield and stuff.
Yeah. I think this is the thing about like watching over patches is that it's really relevant to see when the Worlds patch is released, right? Once the Worlds patch is released, it's an interesting conversation. Until then, I think they're just going to keep adjusting it based off of how professional play works in this current patch and how solo queue works. And so I'm wondering whether or not they might reverse the nerfs if my prediction, and this is an early prediction, it's not a very well-informed one, but if like Ziggs might fall off because of a Vayne counterpick. Because I haven't seen any other good options.
The other reason why we usually see Illusion with the Ziggs is I've seen a few of the comps. I've been mostly watching the LCS in detail, just been watching.
Yeah.
But like when they pick Ziggs, what I noticed is you're picking it with stuff like Illusion, like the Leona or Sejuani, or essentially these champions who have this really, really long range engage, and now your Ziggs Lucian has the ability to follow up. So basically what you can do now is you can try for a Leona ult, which is a super short cooldown, on an enemy carry. If it lands, you can immediately go, okay, Ziggs ult, Lucian ult over top, and basically burst someone down from off their screen, essentially, is the idea. We can have like Leona jumps in, and now Ziggs can trigger her passive and dump a bunch more damage on top of her by just throwing his ult from super far away. So it enables this, okay, we can try for these really long range engages, and it's no risk to us. There's a really high reward, but it's no risk because like, oh, if Leona ult misses, so they cleanse it, like whatever. It's a 45-second cooldown by late game. So it enables this kind of extra long range engage playstyle.
Nice. I'm going to put a pause here because my cat is bothering the door. That's another trend in the videos I did the entire spring. There she goes. Look at that. People get to actually see the cat go. There it is. All right. So that was the most interesting trend for me, right? The second most interesting trend to me was that there are no top lane metas.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. I don't see any, like, there's no one champion that I'm seeing in the top lane that is a consistency.
Defining the meta.
Yeah.
That's true. It's true. Yeah, its top lane has been, lots of different things. We've seen,
Now, I know I said I would only talk about the up until August 12th, but I was literally starting off August 13th playoffs right before I did the recording of this video, and I saw an Ornn. I'm just putting that out there, just like right off the bat. But I think I've seen a total of 10 unique or 12 unique champions in top lane being played across all 5 regions that I've started playing already.
like, just off the top of my head, we got like Gwen, Mordekaiser, Camille, Viego, Lee Sin, Tom Kench.
Lucian.
Like, yeah, we've seen Lucian. We've seen
Ornn.
Yep. Renekton, obviously.
Camille. Fiora.
Yep. Seen Fiora's.
Yeah. And I think that reaches the 12.
I
think I'll put a counter.
Top.
Huh?
I think we've seen Yasuo top.
No Yasuo yet.
Okay. It wasn't top lane.
Not in playoffs, at least.
It's like Jace.
Played. Jace, yeah. Jace top, yeah. I don't know. Editor me will probably put a counter up here as we're counting champions. Sorry, future me.
Definitely Nara for sure. He's been played a lot. Yeah.
And I think this is the
Set.
Oh yeah, Set. I didn't count at this point. The future me will count. And I think it speaks a lot to the fact that there's a very limited pool in jungle, which informs an even shorter pool in bot lane and mid lane. That a lot of them have to be rounded out by the top lane. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I've seen maybe a handful of junglers, right? I think I can count. And I'm not going to count anomalies because I saw Sejuani once.
I've seen Sejuani a couple times though.
Only once, I think I've seen her. Across all of the games, I've only seen her once.
Okay.
But I've seen a lot of Lee Sin. I've seen a lot of Jin Zhao. I've seen a lot of Diana.
A lot of Zac.
Zac is a little bit less frequent. Zac is more commonly done in support. I know that we saw jungle Zac in LCS.
I've seen it a lot in LCK as well.
Again, playoffs
Okay.
and regular season tend to not play out the same way.
True. But LCK is playing a lot of Zac in their end of the regular season.
In the regular season, yes. And if that trend
What
continues,
about it?
then that's another thing we can put out. But like,
Yep.
I don't know if they're playing still on 11.15 in their regular season, because I think that's what's the linchpin is that because the pools for all other 4 lanes are very limited. Like, I saw one unique pick, and again, I thought I would never talk about the playoff series so far today, but the one game that I watched of the 13th of August saw Samira. This is the only unique pick that I have seen. I've seen quite a bit of Varus being banned or pick. I've seen some Ashe. I've seen some Vayne. I've seen some Aphelios. And then it starts becoming
a lot of mages in the bot
samey.
lane.
Yeah.
Like Ziggs and Syndra
Mm-hmm.
are the biggest 2 for sure.
There's the Tristana and Lucian, which often tends to flip between the 3 lanes. And I think it's a worrying trend to me that the way that this patch is being played out is that the top lane is what makes or breaks the vast majority of the composition. Right? And not to say that like any other meta where it's a mid lane or bot lane, the same thing happens is better. I don't like that any much more. But the fact that there's not the same kind of flexibility in the other places, I don't know. Something strikes me as weird for that. And I think, and I have a theory for this, and tell me if you've seen any particular trend yourself here. But I think it's because there's been a drop in dragon priority.
Yeah, it's true. It used to be everyone's like, okay, we need to try to rush the early souls, but we've seen most everywhere has been okay. We can give up 2 dragons, not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is true.
Right, despite the fact that sometimes some of the earlier dragons would be beneficial to pick up, given your composition, right? Like, some compositions really benefit from getting the soul really early, and teams will still opt not to go for them. And there's a higher priority on getting Rift Herald. Now, beforehand, that used to just mean that you were focusing on your top lane play, but compositions now that don't have a focus or priority on top lane are still doing that, right? As if, like, the priority of the game is making sure that the completed factor of your composition, your top lane pick, succeeds, right? And not because, like, you're going to guarantee put your Herald juice to top lane, but it's more because, like, your top lane tends to be more successful if your team is also focusing up in that area because you put more resources and pressure there in general. Now, whether or not that's intentional or not, it's still a consequence of the situation, right? Because a lot of times you've gotten very like, mid lane still has some variety to it. It's not as bad, but I've seen a lot of LeBlanc. I've seen a lot of Lucian. I'm seeing a lot of, like, I've seen some Lissandra. I've not seen a single Orianna game. Do you know how weird that is? That I've not seen a single Orianna game yet? Like, I get it.
Actually kind of,
it's the first week, but that's like so many games, no Orianna.
Looking at the stats here, it's only been a couple of games, but like for the LCL, first week of playoffs, the largest champ pool is jungle with 6.
The LCL?
LCL.
That's Russia. That's the 13th of August. I have yet to watch those.
Okay.
This would be news to me. I was talking about, like, the week 1 trends.
Okay.
Which is the 7th to the 12th.
I'm just looking at numbers.
No, that makes sense. No, yeah, so that's interesting. So that tells me some things. That's interesting. That now I have to, once I've seen Russia go.
Wait, here you go. Europe is like we have a similar in 4 out of the 5 roles. right? So there's one like mid lane, we got like one game of Kali, one game Lulu, one game of Zoe, one game of Orianna, one game of Ryze. Like we got a
This
good
is Europe
variety.
again?
This is Europe.
Yeah, Europe and Russia start at the same time.
But
yeah.
in jungle, it has been Xin Zhao versus Viego, basically exclusively.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. That's what I thought. All right. It's starting to like look very samey across the board from the jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. Last year, in 2020, the jungle pool, despite the fact that it was very Lilia centered, still had a lot of variety with them, right? I don't remember such restriction in pick and ban, and this could be, and this is more like me guessing than anything else because it's only been like 5 days, not even technically 3 days worth of playoff series. I haven't yet to watch the most of the 13th games, but it's been 3 North American playoff series, 1 Chinese, 2 best of 3s from Southeast Asia, and 1 best of 5 and 2 best of 5s from Japan and Brazil, respectively. That's still quite a few games, but it's still a notable trend that these all 5 of the regions that I've watched so far have very drastically different styles, and yet the same thing I've observed, which is very limited pools in all 4 bottom parts of the role, but a huge variety in the top lane.
The weird thing to me just here is I'm looking at it and I'm like, the bans are entirely different.
Oh yeah.
So people are banning different things, but then the actual champ pools are very similar.
Yeah.
So like LEC is like, okay, we're gonna ban. Okay, Thresh is a ban in most places, but it's like we're gonna ban Kalista and Twisted Fate. North America is like we're gonna ban your Aurelia and Jace.
Yeah. And that's really weird just in general. Like, why is that the variety in picks and bans?
That's probably a specific player.
Yeah, they're targeting very specific like, and it's cool to see that like that's like the picks and the bans strategies are very different across the board, and that's the fun part about watching all of these different regions, is that the ban strategies are always interesting to watch. Even if there's like a similar trend across the board, most of the time bans and philosophies around the picks and bans are always different, and that's cool. But it struck me really weird that like your top lane was picked early as a flex or last, or like near your second phase.
Yeah.
And that used to never be the case, or at least if it was the case, it's because you're picking something safer and you're usually question marked for it.
I'm assuming you haven't watched this, but Ash Top is a thing that happened.
Is this Europe or is this Russia?
LCL.
It's Russia. Cool. Great. Okay. It's always Russia. Russia has. So, fun fact about Russia: Russia usually only has 3 best of 5s. Usually, up until this summer, where they've doubled the number of best of 5s they have and adding a losers bracket. So I'm going to be watching a lot of people who are usually just terrible in the near future. So no, it does not surprise me that for some reason Russia decided to do something bizarre.
LFL is?
That's the French league. Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Out of the 11 regions, you have the LCL, the TCL, the LCO, the PCS, the LJL, usually VCS, but it looks like not this year. The LCK, LEC, LCS, LPL, and LCO.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on that kind of thing going forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, are there any trends that you've noticed that you want to bring attention to?
Let's see here. I've seen a lot of people may feel otherwise, but I kind of really like what Viego does to the meta because I'm seeing a lot of teams either specifically play around, okay, we're gonna deny Viego his resets and make a comp where it's like, okay, all of our champions have a button they can press that makes them like just hard to burst, or we're gonna play, okay, we're gonna set up a comp where we can just force a pick and be like, okay, we have like this guaranteed kill, so we can get Viego going, get him his resets going. So it's kind of cool to see like the both teams reacting to how strong Viego is in the meta.
Yeah.
So it's like either we'll see, okay, we're gonna pick Xayah in the bot lane because Viego can't just jump on me and kill me. I can just ult away. Or like it's seeing Xayah specifically as a counter to the enemy burst comp, for example.
Keep talking. I'm just gonna be right back again. My cat.
Yep. I guess just to clarify that then. So
I'm back. It didn't take very long.
For example, the Dignitas comp in their game 2 game. So they're picking Mordekaiser, Xin Zhao, Xayah, Rakan. So basically, Xayah or Rakan can both jump away super easily. You have Mordekaiser and Xin Zhao ults. Right? So Viego is not going to be able to get off his AoE resets. The enemy team is trying to play this big team fight comp and saying, okay, we're going to team fight you. We're going to, jump on you and burst you. I'm like, okay, we're not going to let you do that.
Oh, wait, hold the phone here. I think you hit the nail on the coffin as to why the top laners are so diverse, but not the rest of the map then.
Okay.
I think it's because of Viego. Think about it. If you only have so many options that work that are good in meta, where you have yet to ban Viego, because bans against Viego are not advised because he's not that strong, right? But you still want to avoid him becoming that strong with certain picks on your side. You then limit the options that you have in terms of like, what can you pick, right? And those picks tend to limit the option that the side that picked Viego has. Or if neither pick, it's usually like a chicken race. And so if somebody's picked Viego top and they're flexing it, then that tends to inform also what top laner you're going to pick. But top laners have a lot more variety because not a lot of top laners are carries, and those that are carries, if Viego takes them, it's harder to continue the sequence to carry because you've limited all of the options for your next jumps.
Yeah.
I don't know. A 2 and 2 put together just happened in my head. But no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it was really it's reminiscent to when Silas was first released.
And they're changing the
comps
around him, saying we don't like Malphite is going to fall out of the meta because why would I pick Malphite when? Or almost a Akali too. It's like I think there's a forget who said it was a Captain Flowers thing. He's like, if you see an Akali and you lock in Silas and you take her ult, you are now a better Akali.
Yep.
Silas with Akali ult is just flat out better Akali.
Yeah, same thing with Gnar, same thing with Alistar. It's one of those situations where I love these characters design-wise, but I hate them for professional play. It almost ruins your balance because you have to now balance in accordance to its relationship with other champions.
Yep. It's that kind of design. It's cool sometimes. Like we're seeing, like for example, Rell is not specifically in a good place right now.
No.
But a lot of there is a couple champions who are very shield reliant, who are in a good place. So when the enemy team is playing the Tahm Kench and is playing the Sterak's Xin Zhao and being like a lot of these like Sterak's on multiple champions and these very high shield comps. You're like, okay, even though Rell's not specifically in the best place, we have seen a couple games of her specifically as being like, okay, the value of a Rell Q on a Tahm Kench is massive, for example, right?
I mean, it usually tends to be the pros and cons, especially since Rell's relevance is relegated to irrelevance. That was not on purpose.
Irrelevant.
No, but you're absolutely correct, right? Because there was a time where Silas was not as high in relevancy, also, and I think he's risen a little bit in popularity, and I think it's just from contextual situations. Um, yeah, I think it's also.
But
I think the bans
you're
also
right.
become boring when you ban Viego.
It's true. Yeah, there was a lot of champs that aren't played because like if we want to play Malphite, like let's say Malphite was strong and we want to play it, it's like, well, we now basically have to waste a ban on Silas
Mm-hmm.
to be able to play Malphite without it being like, hey guys, I gave him a Malphite ult, right? So
Well,
one other trend I did notice is
yep.
I've seen a lot of the Varus plus Ryze combo. So
Mm.
it's interesting because you have the long range of Varus being able to say, okay, we can poke them down with like the physical damage, which basically forces people into the Ryze, and you can use the Ryze as either this split push threat or use the Varus to be like, okay, what you do against the Varus is you want to get inside of his range and get to him, not just sit super far away from him. But now you're playing into the Ryze, so using them together a lot. Seen it quite a few times,
Yeah, I haven't seen
which is
Rise
funny
as
because like they're
much.
opposite playstyles.
Yeah, I haven't seen Rise as much across the board. I've seen him a couple of times, and I think he's very effective, especially when it comes to like in terms of like flavoring the kind of composition you want to do, because it allows you to do. I think it's not limited to either split push 1-3-1, 1-4, or team fight or objective based ones, because like it's like the kit that it provides is well suited for all of those playstyles.
Yeah, he
Um,
provides macro with his ults. He can split push. He does a lot of AOE, so he can team fight really well.
mhm.
For sure.
The thing that I'm more interested, however, is that it's one of the answers to Varus, which I've seen more and more now being banned, as opposed
Yep.
to being like looked into countered, which I think is another trend of like is another way that you can see if something is way too broken is if they have to immediately start planning around it or banning it completely. And I think Varus is a surprising pick because I thought it was just completely nerfed to hell not even earlier into the year for it to gain relevancy again as playoff rolls around.
But it's the same thing with okay. So Viego and Xin Zhao are two main junglers, right?
Yep.
What do both of them do? Xin Zhao jumps in, has that circular ult, can focus one person. So he jumps on them, can focus one person, and usually like maybe burst them down. That's the way he builds, and then survive because of his ult and his score drinker and his Sterak's and stuff.
Yep.
Viego does the same type of thing. He wants to get in, kill one person, maybe get his resets off, be able to right. You want to get that first original kill to get the ball rolling, be able to do stuff, and you kind of ult in on one person. So Varus enables that same playstyle of, okay, we have this extra long range engage option, and I can throw out a Varus ult, and if I miss it, it's not the end of the world. We're going for these like longer range picks,
Mm-hmm.
similar like why Ashe be played. It's like, okay, we can try to set up a pick using our Thresh if we can get it, is always the best of that, but that's why we're seeing a lot of Thresh bans.
Mm-hmm.
Thresh, Ashe, this Leona, Sejuani, even we're seeing that we have these long range engage options to be able to say, okay, now our Xin Zhao or Viego can get that pick. And in a lot of situations, if we can get that one key pick on, say, the enemy AD carry or the enemy jungler or something, we can now try to, okay, we can 4v5 Baron or something, or we can set up a siege while their wave clears down or something. There's a lot of stuff you can do by getting that one pick. A lot of the current game states.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's
Um,
no, that just makes sense. That's just pure, just a 1-to-1. Um, I don't know. I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of these very natural consequences from interesting pick bans and interesting setups have caused the limitation to a lot of these compositions and a lot of the same ish type of styles of play.
mhm.
Um, but given the same-ish type of styles of play, this is where I want to go into, I believe, because we've gone into about 35 minutes now of a video, and I don't want necessarily want to make it super long, like more than an hour. In this next segment, I think we'll take a good bit. Which is, I want to talk about the power ranking that I have. Now, again, I'm going to put a note here. We are recording this on the 13th, but I have not watched more than a game of the 13th games, so I don't know anything that's happening in Russia other than Ash Top for some godforsaken reason. I have not watched anything from Europe, which are the two regions that started on the 13th. And then tomorrow on the 14th is Turkey. Out of the 5 regions that are happening right now, I do want to point out that China is really far ahead, and I've watched literally their 7th through 10th place teams. That's not good, right? And I'm watching them, and I know that you've probably read a little bit of my notes here, but I've talked about how a lot of the regions have impressed me because it looks like they've done a huge step up since MSI, right? Japan and Brazil especially have, from their lower seeded teams, it looks like whatever was learned from there did actually come back, unlike usually the trend of previous years where they're like, oh, the top team goes out to an international tournament, they learn so much, they bring it back to their region, and then they don't learn anything. This time it actually shows that they've learned something. There's a lot more aggressiveness that is not just random flailing about. It still looks like it's for random flailing about, but it's not like baiting your time and trying to like scale up until you randomly fight. This looks like they have like a plan that they're working with. The thing that really irks me, and it's especially if you do if you read the last sentence of my Team Liquid versus C9 retrospective, right? And I'll read it word for word here. It says, "Don't be fooled. This may look better than the timid NA teams of past, but it mostly looks like lashing out randomly to me." And I make this point of note because, like, a lot of the teams around the world at this point have shown a lot more aggressiveness, a lot more proactivity, and I've talked about in my spring playoff series that, like, proactivity to me is a priority versus just, like, passiveness, because more teams that are proactive, even if they make more mistakes, tend to win more often. That's an actual thing that I tracked. But if all regions start becoming more proactive and every team starts being more proactive, great, that's fantastic. But now you have to distinguish between the ones that have actually done the foreplanning and thought, as opposed to what I claimed as random thrashing about. And I mentioned this because, like, the first game, when I looked at the second series that played overall, which is the Evil Geniuses versus Dignitas series, I was slightly impressed by how Evil Genius played. I was like, wow, that's much cleaner execution on their part. That's really cool. And it was like Dignitas was just kind of like, they're cool on their own individually, but there's like not enough coordination whatsoever. And it was a 3-1 win. And then I watched the Immortals versus Dignitas series, and Immortals beat them 3-0. And I went, huh? How did Dignitas beat Evil Geniuses? Which on paper, granted it's the second series, you usually skewed information when it's only the second series. It looked good on the side of Evil Geniuses, right? They looked more aggressive, they had more proactivity on things. And Immortals did not look more organized. They looked definitely more proactive, and they definitely had a better understanding of their win conditions, but they did not look more like, they didn't look like they totally set themselves up to win all the time. There were too many times that Dignitas had so many chances to win or come back from all 3 of those games, despite the fact that on one side it looked like an absolute stomp. Because they were absolute stomps, but they were never not stomps that, like, Dignitas had no chance of coming back from.
Well, a couple things on that. So, like, Insanity, for me is possibly the weak point for Immortals, especially given the other mid lane matchups that he has to play against Perks or something.
Yeah.
But I've seen him play a lot more. He isn't trying to do as much damage in the mid lane position. He was playing the Steel Caps plus Everfrost, Rapid Fire Cannon, Twisted Fate, and this kind of thing, where he's very much playing for his team, and they're playing around either the Viego in the top or the jungle, or I was looking at the numbers. I think Ryze had like 38% of his team's damage.
The tracks, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really just Ryze is staying untouched and sitting back on his his Varus and his Ziggs and these kinds of things, and just pumping out huge amounts of damage. And specifically in this series, Dignitas was not able to get to the Ziggs or get to the Varus kind of thing, and just left it there as much.
That's weird because I distinctly remember so many times where they actually did, and somehow
he got caught like once in the second game and stuff. But
yeah, it's one of those things where like the execution. There's two factors to this. The execution that Immortals pulled off looked stronger than EG, and then I looked back at some of the clips that EG played, and I was like, wow, rose-colored glasses on my end. This is not strong gameplay from North America.
Yes, a lot of it is Dignitas making more mistakes. I recorded it because it was hilarious. Dignitas, I think, was the third game, spent 40.6 seconds hitting a Baron.
Yep, I do remember that.
Usually it's like, okay, a Baron, you'd be like, okay, we can, if you give a good champ, you can put like, okay, we can maybe burst down Baron in like 15 seconds if we have the right champs for it.
Yep.
They have an Aphelios on their team.
Yep, they totally could have done it in like 10 seconds.
I was watching it. They started Baron. He has Gravitum Severum.
Okay.
So the slow and the lifesteal.
Yeah.
And then he switches guns and gets the Infernum. So it's like he's got like the slow, the lifesteal, and the AoE. Is all he had the entire time. No chakrams. They're doing a Baron for 40 seconds with Aphelios having the wrong guns the entire 40 seconds.
Oh. And so I do this huge amount of build-up for a reason, right? By no means am I under the impression that Japan and Brazil look better than North America. They look significantly better. But the fact that I can compare them to what was the higher seeded teams of North America versus the literal lower seeded teams of Japan and Brazil does not A, look good for North America, and B, in general, doesn't show me an upward positive trend across the region. It just tells me that they've all conflated a trend of aggressive playstyles, just aggressive as opposed to calculated, good paced play.
I do want to throw in the last thing. The 3-man roam squad that Team Liquid did in the one game where they went Shen, Sejuani, Lee Sin.
Mm-hmm.
Is because if that was the coolest thing to me, just because like I played a lot of Sejuani back in the day when she was good, but I'm excited to see her back. But if you look at it like from the early game perspective, that 3 is possibly like the strongest 3v3 you can force there, because Sejuani she gets her stuns off of melee champions auto attacking, right?
Correct.
Shen is a melee support.
Yep.
Who boosts his own attack speed.
Yep.
What other melee support has his own attack speed steroid?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but
like
yes.
Exactly. So basically, and then Lee Sin can jump in on stuff. I guess sure, but Shen brings more.
Yes.
In terms of his taunt and his, right? So like, if you're going in with those 3, it's like, okay, the amount of crowd control we have and the damage from an early game Lee Sin, that 3-man roaming squad is about as terrifying as you can get with like that 3-man roam squad in terms of like an early game 3v3. So they're saying, okay, we're picking these 3 champions, and almost no matter what they pick into that, we should win that. Like, what beats Sejuani, Lee Sin, Shen early game if you're just brawling them?
No, and that was an incredibly effective strategy. And to me, however, that just tells me that like they've there's not a single region in my mind. Cap that. There are all but 2 regions in my mind that have shown me that they're a very solid understanding of pick and ban. There'll be like teams every so often in those regions that are like terrible. And for those who wonder what 2 regions I'm thinking about, I'm talking about Russia and Australia, who just don't give a shit about pick and ban. But see earlier Ash top that I'm gonna learn in a couple hours when I'm watching that.
It's okay, it loses.
I didn't need that.
Sorry.
I hope it loses. That's not the point. The point is that the execution on those compositions and on those strategies are cool up until the fact that you realize that a lot of them are playing. They understand what their win conditions are and what those conditions are to be met, but there's no calculated paced play. It is a lot of go, 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 conflating aggressive approach versus proper understanding of what pace they need to be playing at to gain those win conditions. And there's like a clip in the back of my head that's going from Hotline League, the podcast from Travis, where one of them, I can't remember any of their names. One of them was talking about how going on a rant about how North America was always going to be behind because when you look at one of their tower dives, they don't keep going. They hesitate and stop halfway when it doesn't look like it immediately worked. Compared to other regions, they'll just keep going. And I think that speaks to the mindset of misunderstanding because I've watched a fuck ton of fucking Chinese League of Legends and Korean League of Legends. If something doesn't work from the proper pacing, they don't just randomly just dive full throttle.
Anyway,
right? I get it. If you know that the proper pacing for you to do something is for you to keep going for that dive because your pacing requires that because you're doing something else on the other side and that's how you maximize your chances of winning. But just the mindset of don't hesitate on a thing tells me that you, one, don't understand what the requirements are to your win condition or at your win condition at the time of play, which means you don't know what your pacing is. And 2, you've conflated proper play and good pacing with just aggressive moxie. Right? I don't ever see any of the top teams from even the best team in PCS, which has the most wishy-washy region in the world, right? Their worst teams are literally the worst, but their best team are literally the best. The best teams in the PCS don't just randomly go full moxie 100% and don't think about things. They have a calculated pacing to it. They understand what the timings are supposed to work with for them to do those plays that look like random aggressive plays, right? The whole point of it is that it looks like a calculated hunter instead of just some wild flailing spear throwing. And
yeah, no, that's true. I think a lot of it is it's almost like a psychology thing. It's if you're a support, and if any support's ever done this in solo queue, you probably understand, and you roam top lane, you're giving up a lot. By the time you get there, you're I am going to get something out of this, right? By the time I've invested into doing this. So even if it's you get there and it's well, they have their flash up, they have their ult up, something, this might be a bad idea. They might have their jungler nearby. We don't know where he is. You're well, I'm here already anyway, so I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just being able to, get past that basic psychology of, well, I'm here, I'm ready, I may as well do it.
Yeah.
To, well, I came all this way, but it's not a good idea, so I need to be able to say, it's being able to take the small loss. I forget, one of the casters were talking about this, but it's you're unwilling to accept that small loss So it's saying I wasted 20 seconds coming up here doing this. Now I'm going to have to spend another, whatever, 15 getting back. So
I think it's talking about
I lost some time. I lost some. So it's a small loss, whereas failing that dive is a much bigger loss.
Mm-hmm.
But you're unwilling to accept that small like loss of time and moving around the map and stuff.
Yeah.
So you take a bigger loss in the failed tower dive because of it.
I think that's that's absolutely true. I think what that's referencing is the game Court JJ played Leona. There's like a random roam he did, and everything was already done by the time he got up there. And I don't remember why I remember that clip out of all the fucking events. This speaks to mine about what my issues or what my concerns, not my issues, my concerns are. Is that because I have yet to see the top 2 teams in North America play, right? Because like regular season play and playoff play are wildly different, and if anybody tries to convince you otherwise and say that there's like a higher importance of watching regular play versus playoff play, I'm gonna win that argument. But maybe not. I don't know. Like the point is that like there are at this moment I'm seeing a trend out of the lower seeded teams across the board, right? And those are the teams that we get to see first, and that speaks a lot more to how the region as a whole applies things, right? You're only as good as the weakest team that you can beat.
Yep.
Right? And if everybody across the board is really close, then that speaks a lot to how your best team is. But if there's like a really bad team and a really good team, then it's really harder to evaluate that. And right now, across the board in all of these regions, China has a lot closer in terms of like competitive viability amongst each other, and those teams that are low on the rung show a lot more consistency more often because it's still the lower seeds. They still do some random flailing about, but they show it more often than teams that, comparatively speaking, because China has a huge roster of teams. They've got like 19 teams in their region. You've got the 6th seeded team versus the 7th seeded team in Immortals versus Dignitas. And I just watch the virtually last place team, if you're to compare them in North American standards, from China, play significantly better and more consistently because they had a better understanding of how to pace their win conditions and know how to minimize their small losses.
I think you're right. I think a lot of some of the lower North American teams this year's wins have been, if you watch like the like a Neo or a Raze, is they're good at like the same thing. They play like almost like Sven. It's the sense that they're good at being able to stay back enough. They don't jump in. They don't go for the huge plays, and because they sit back on their longer range 80 carries and mages and stuff, they're able to consistently apply the damage. So when the enemy team makes a mistake and overextends or overdives or something like that, these players are able to pump out enough damage to basically counter their opponent's mistakes. When your opponent goes too far, the opponent overdives, they're able to do the damage they need to win fights. So like when you see Immortals win, for example, it's okay, their opponent takes a kind of questionable fight and takes too much damage because of it, kind of thing, right? Like, now they're able to get the lead off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Cloud9 almost does the same thing, except they're a little better at it. Plus,
but that's the problem, right? I hated, and I think I did this the entire time I did the Road to MSI series. Every time that I noticed that a team was winning off of like capitalizing on mistakes and not being the ones who apply the win conditions, it worried me in the long term more than anything else. Cool, you win now, but that just tells me you're not going to be able to compete internationally, right?
Yeah.
And this is the same thing. Cool, you're good at being aggressive, but your team being aggressive doesn't equate at wins. One of the casters mentioned that Evil Genius is trying to like rebrand North America, and I'm like, cool. Did anybody rebrand LCK? Like, no one rebranded South Korea. They were aggressive before. They just other teams learn how to be aggressive and calculated, and they're like, shit, we got to bring up our game, I guess. And that's just what happened. Like, it's one thing of being like slow and calculated and taking your time, and then realizing that people who play faster win more often, and then confusing playing faster and aggressive. And then you have players that are like, oh, but we're going to be far away. Like Sven, like you mentioned, like people are more consistent at damage. And so like when a team is being aggressive and doesn't understand it and they get punished for it, then none of the teams are going to learn. They're all going to go back to the trends that they always did. And that's because the teams that are more successful are the ones that catch out the mistakes more often. And so they're going to play more passively and wait for the team to be more aggressive. And it's a deadly loop.
Yeah, because like when Cloud9 won their one game, and when it's like when they have this big long like the fight that goes on for like basically 30 seconds, and it's okay, Sven's sitting back on Varus, and the fight's going on for a super long time, and he's able to be like, okay, land one arrow, a few seconds later, and land the next arrow, and he's just applying damage over the really chaotic fight over time, right? And he's good at staying out of the chaos and just.
Yeah.
He's not trying to go up into auto attack range. He's like, okay, I'm just going to sit back and shoot Qs and apply just enough damage that my team needs while I'm staying safe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. I'm just hoping that like that's not the I hope, because like the big meme is, oh no, not just North America, most teams that are not the top 3 regions, right? Like even the legacy regions fall into this trap, but like the top 5 teams of worlds that qualify are the ones that don't like that. It's not that they don't play safe, is that they play a very good calculated paced game, and all of the other teams slowly but surely learn over time up until they face those teams that playing safe is better, because aggressive plays, which is what was the learned philosophy from halfway, the MSI philosophy is you got to be more aggressive, and then they get to the playoffs in summer and they're like, more aggressive is not doing it, you got to be more passive, and then they bring that to Worlds, and then they learn again that they needed to be more proactive and like increase their pace, and it's like a vicious cycle that just keeps happening and happening and happening and happening, and I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing that this is what's going to happen. Great, you're playing aggressive, but it looks like flailing and not calculation, and that means that the teams that like punish you and are patient are going to learn to be punishing and patient, and then they're not going to do well in Worlds. And this is why I wanted to start the segment 20 minutes ago.
Is Akshan enabled for this playoffs or no?
No, Akshan will only be enabled for Worlds.
Gotcha.
This is the same thing that they did last year. They only allowed Lilia was the only last champion, so the last champion that could be played that was new is
Sejuani?
No, not last year. This year is
Vex? Vex?
Vex?
She's coming out in September.
No. I'm talking about like for playoffs.
Oh, okay.
It's the one before that. The
Oh.
Puppeteer. Jesus Christ.
Gwen?
Yes, Gwen. That's what it is.
Oh, Gwen's been out for a while though.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like they tend like the same thing. Lilia was out for a bit, for a couple of weeks before the playoffs started. Akshan has not been out long enough for it to qualify. So when it came out, the first regions to play were North America and Brazil, and because Akshan was released within 2 weeks of their playoff starting, none of the regions play him. Yeah. I think that's the standard ruling across the board since 2020 is that there's a cutoff point. No one can play that champion. And I think that's going to be different when Worlds comes around.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be played though, because he's almost more like a Talon. Is like if he gets ahead, he can do damage, but his base damages aren't that good. Like he needs his items and stuff to actually do damage. So it's like if he's able to beat you early, which his base damage is bad, so he shouldn't. But like if he gets a lead, he's super mobile and can chase you basically anywhere. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
he can snowball quite easily, and bringing his teammates back is a huge thing. But
Yeah.
if he's not ahead, it's like, well, he's flying into your team
And
and
dying. Yeah.
not killing anything.
Hey.
Like everyone in solo queue is like, oh, he's so scary. He can jump at you from basically anywhere. It's like, well,
Yeah. So could Talon.
he's like a Talon. Yeah, he can jump on you from really anywhere. But it's just a matter of like, does he have a lot of damage to kill you?
No.
If yes, be scared. If no, who cares?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, those were my thoughts. I was just more. I wanted to bring that out there because I'm gonna make that a shorthand for every other week. Hopefully, we can do this once a week. If with just Conor or just me or with Josh or with any combination of the three of us. Hopefully, he can come also sometimes. He's got also a fairly busy schedule, so I get that. I want to point this out now in this earlier episode because I'm going to say this a lot, like I mentioned in the previous run of playoffs that I was watching. I am not going to be impressed by teams who just play aggressive or just punish. You need to show something else. Because these trends are cool and everything, but if these trends aren't backed up by some skill of some sort or some understanding of the win conditions, these are just gonna be footnote teams at the end of the day. And none of the teams that I've seen so far would make top 8 at Worlds. I mean, it's literally only like 8 playoff series so far, but like it's still like I think a quarter of the teams total. I don't remember. There's
Something around that, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. No one so far has shown me anything that's like impressive. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Maybe something interesting Europe will show our way. Don't tell me anything yet. I'm guessing you've watched already the European series.
Have that.
Oh, okay, cool. There you go.
I was just like on like the stats website glancing at
Gotcha.
the champions are played and stuff.
Hey. Well, with that, I think that's a good place for us to end this episode. Hopefully next week we get to talk about every region having played, because by the time the 20th rolls around, every region will have played, including Australia, which just randomly picked a day for them to be the only region that plays, for them to start. Yeah. Korea, I think, is the last team to play the region if Vietnam never gets to play. Well, thank you, Conor, for joining me on this first episode of World Watch.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for all of those who watch us, including some of our Brazilian fans. And if you enjoyed this video, let us know what you thought in the comments down below. Are there any teams you're looking forward to? Is there any particular trends you've been seeing at this point? Let us know down below. We may talk about it next week. If you have any questions, awesome. Leave a like and subscribe. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the kind of content that we make here. And we'll see you on the next one next week. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Take care.